Substance or
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience, although it seems like it wasn't in vain because we had a few stragglers joining us along, and some longtime friends. I'd like to welcome back Daniel Sridharma, former ACDE faculty, former ANU PhD student, longtime friend of the department and the school. Daniel's visiting us for another conference at the moment, but we're very delighted that he can join us for our first ACDE seminar of the year. I'll be co-chairing with Paul because I have to duck out, so Paul will be handling the Q&A. We have a number of people joining us over from Indonesia and online as well, so welcome to you all. It's joined with the Indonesia study group as well. And with that, yeah, hand over to Daniel. And big thanks for coming back to town.
Thanks, Ryan. So, hi everyone, thanks for coming to my talk. It's always great to be here. I'm still nervous every time I present for you guys after all these years. So this is I'm gonna talk about. And thanks also. I heard that the seminar is not usually on Wednesdays, so thanks for coming, especially. So I want to talk about the recently heavily revised paper that we did on looking at the impact of government policy to do exams, national exams using computers rather than on papers. So I'll talk a lot about CBT, which is computer-based testing, and PBT, paper-based testing. And the intervention here is CBT. This is heavily revised because when we started doing this project, none of the new DID methods were around. And then halfway through, Goodman-Bacon came out with this idea that you can't do two-way fixed effects. And then Callaway-Santana came out, and then everybody came out. So we decided to, change the method to the Callaway-Santana one. But the results are actually the same. So not sure what happened, but anyway, we're already using the latest methods. And here. So I'm keen to get feedback from you, especially as we're a little bit still struggling with the results because it's very sensitive to some specifications. I should also mention that these are personal views and not the views of my employer, because now I have to say these things. So I'll get right into it. So cheating generally happens on high stakes exams. So we all know that in developed countries, Italy and the US, about 5% of classrooms cheat. In India, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, the cheating is about 38 to 43% of classrooms. In Mexico, it was 7%. Interestingly, after the government introduced test-based monetary incentives to teachers, increased from 7 to 32%. So, as you make exams high stakes, cheating tends to happen and tends to be high. The problem is that cheating could become an equilibrium because,
I'm sorry, it's a very, very early question. What do you mean by classrooms cheating? Because I typically think of students cheating on tests. So just to clarify, are you focusing on a particular kind of cheating? And
So usually when people try to measure cheating in exams, they can't do individual ones because they have to have a reference group to compare it to. So they can do it at the classroom level, or they can do it at the school level, or they can do it at the district level, but it can't be individual level. So that's why they use classroom. Yeah.
And cheating takes many forms, Daniel, from mild to severe, I guess, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And these studies today.
This basically combines everything. Yeah. So, students or teachers not honestly doing the exam, basically. Yeah, so it's a broad definition. I should also mention this is my first time presenting in person in 3 years. So happy to do it here, but still. So cheating could become an equilibrium because when the stakes are something like monetary or performance, and it's easier if there's an opportunity to cheat, then it's easier to cheat rather than to study. For teachers, it's easier to let the students teach rather than cheat, rather than teach them, to actually know the answers. And the problem is if that becomes if too many teachers and schools and students cheat, the honest ones usually get lower scores because they couldn't cheat. And then they have an incentive to join the cheating. And if that happens, then it became more widespread. And then it became an equilibrium. The problem is cheating reduces the exam signaling value. So in Indonesia, if you go from junior secondary school, which is grade 9, to senior high school, then usually the top schools select students based on their scores. So then if there's cheating, then the signaling value of the exam becomes lower. Also, employers, when they look at potential employees, they look at exam scores, and if they cheat, then it's hard to use that as signaling value. Another problem is that the resources spent to organize exams in Indonesia, for example, it costs about $9 million for a level. So for junior secondary, it's 9 million. For senior secondary, it's maybe similar. So if students cheat, the results are useless, then the money is basically wasted. Somebody's already typing in the chat. I'm going to ignore it. So what we did in this paper is that we evaluate CBT, which is implemented by Indonesian government to eliminate cheating in national exams. They started in 2015 with a pilot of 40 junior secondary schools and then ramped up very quickly. By 2019, so in just 4 years, close to 80% of 50,000 plus junior secondary schools have switched from PBT to CBT. So the contribution of our study is that there are a few evaluations of these kinds of interventions, with the explicit aim of reducing cheating in the context of widespread systemic cheating or in developing countries. There's one in India. The others are mainly in developed countries like the US or India. And the second one that we did is that we used the spillovers to the PBT schools to tease out sort of the state of the cheating market, the demand and the supply of answer keys and these things, whether that changed after schools switched to CBT. So the headline findings, schools that adopted CBT experienced a 0.4 standard deviations reduction in the average national exam score in the first year of adopting CBT. The impact heterogeneity results show that the reduction is more likely to be caused by a smaller chance to cheat rather than other explanations. For example, moving from paper to computer, students who are not used to using computer, then they will have trouble and they will score lower. We show that that's unlikely to be the main explanation for this correction. And on the spillovers, we found that schools that were still on PBT cheated less and scored lower. When we corrected for the spillover, we saw a larger effect, and this effect didn't diminish over time.
Daniel, we are in the Zoom. We can't see the slides moving. So what we see is the slide number 1.
I'm moving it here. Sorry.
I need to reshare.
Yeah.
Should I stop sharing?
Thanks, Dika. We'll try to stop and reshare again.
So while waiting, I forgot to mention that this paper is done by a lot of authors. Emily Berghout, Menno Pradhan, both from University of Amsterdam. Arya, who's actually here, and I just realized that Arya moved from Indonesia to Australia last month. And also Rahmawati, who's from the Ministry of Education. Sorry, Arya, I forgot to introduce.
Yeah.
Just share the first one.
Which one? No, the left one, you think? Oh, just see the whole screen? Okay.
Okay now, Dika?
Better?
Now I can see the slide, the title slide. Okay, now it's moving. It's good now.
Are we up to?
Yeah, no, it's okay. I'll do it. Thanks. So yeah, thanks everyone. So the rest of the paper is I'm going to talk about the data and descriptive stats, focusing mostly on the extent of cheating in the national exams, and then I introduce the CBT intervention in more detail, and then I'll talk about the methods, show you the results and spillovers, and then finish. So the data that we use in this paper is we focus on the junior secondary schools. As I mentioned, in Indonesia, the national exams take place in grade 9 at the end of junior secondary school, and also in grade 12 at the end of senior secondary school. We have data on the school level national exam scores of 50,000. So the universe of junior secondary schools in Indonesia, they participate in national exams. So we have information on the average score and standard deviation of math, science, Indonesian, English. These are the 4 subjects tested. We also have the number of exam takers for every year between 2011 and 2019. And then we have the IDs of the close to 40,000 schools that switched to CBT between 2015, the 40 pilot schools, and then the rest, and the year in which they switched. We have the integrity index. I'll talk more about that later. In 2015 to 2018 for schools that still did the PBT, because integrity index cannot be calculated for schools that already switched to CBT. We have administrative data on school resources in 2015 for 34,000 schools that are administered or fall under the Ministry of Education. So the rest fall under the Ministry of Religious Affairs. We also have the National Socioeconomic Survey 2018 aggregated at district level to check some of the correlates between district characteristics and test scores. So I'm going to talk about cheating in national exams in Indonesia. So these 2 photos show you an example of cheating. This one on the left is just the answer keys, basically. So let me show it here. So this thing here, this P here, shows you the test booklet that's actually the relevant one. And there are 2 questions that require like writing the answers, and then the rest is like multiple choice questions. So in Indonesia, to reduce cheating before CBT, the ministry have like 20 booklets per classroom. They randomly assign. So you can see this one, the front one is for package number 5, one in the back for package number 4, package number 3. So they already have the answers. And then they just distribute this, across students or either during the exam or before the exam and things. So that's more like not the sophisticated one. This one is more sophisticated because it's actually typed. So somebody found the time to, between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. 5 a.m. is when the exam problem sets are opened, the booklets. 7 a.m. is when the exam started. In 2 hours, they got all the booklets, like all the 20 booklets, answer keys, both the multiple choice and the one where you have to write stuff. So this happens everywhere, and the Indonesians among the audience would confirm that this happens everywhere. I've also heard anecdotal evidence where teachers actually, they let all the students do the exam and then collect all the answer keys, and then they take out the ones that contain wrong answers, and then they fix them. So the teachers also do it.
That student pose for that picture.
I think it's one of the adults that use this as evidence. Yeah. So national exams in Indonesia are high stakes. I mentioned it's done in grades 9 and 12. Actual performance in the exam itself is not the only determinant whether a student graduates or not since 2011, but it's still high stakes because it determines acceptance into higher school levels, and it's used as a measure of school quality by local governments. And it's important for local governments to have 100% passing rates, and also they compete a little bit on the scores as well. And also parents want their kids to do well because of they want their kids to be accepted in the better schools. So as I mentioned, and the 2 pictures before showed, news articles report that students can buy answer sheets. Many teachers encourage cheating, and anecdotal evidence also exists. The Economist put this article in 2011 about Indonesian schools, more cheating or less or else. So, it's actually widely known. What was unknown, so everybody knows that there's cheating. What was unknown until 2015 was the extent of cheating, how many, how bad it is, and things like that. Quantitative methods, and then they added qualitative verification based on consistency with historical exam scores. For example, a school that has performed, relatively low for the past few years and it suddenly increased, then the suspicion that the school cheated increased based on school accreditation reports and also opinions from the ministry's provincial units. So the ministry has an office in every province, and then they can provide information of whether the scores make sense or not. So all this is then translated into a scale from 0 to 100, where a higher score means less extent of cheating, because that's called an integrity index. So 100 means you have full integrity, 0 means no integrity. And then the ministry set 70 as the threshold score for cheating. We're not really sure why 70, but that's what they did. They shared the results of the integrity index with the district governments, but there are no consequences to the district government. There's no lower funding. There is no sort of encouragement to perform better in terms of reducing cheating or things like that. What we're not sure as well is it's not clear if district governments then share the results to the school. We did this unsystematic and unscientific survey of asking school principals in some provinces in Indonesia. And they just said basically the district never gave them the integrity index results. So either they know from the ministry website or they know from other sources, but district governments, not from district governments. Okay. Okay. So this is what the integrity index look like. So the one on the left is the distribution of the integrity index. It goes from, in 2015, it goes from 0 to 100. And a third, so 33% of junior secondary schools score below 70, which is the threshold. So if you think of that threshold as cheating and not cheating, then 33% is much higher than in developed countries, much higher in Mexico, but still lower than in India. Only about a quarter of the schools score 80 or higher, which is what the ministry said that they're confident that these schools do not cheat. So that's the distribution of the integrity index. Now this is the exam scored by integrity. So we divided integrity index into quintiles. And as you can see here in the schools with the lowest integrity, so these schools most likely cheat or definitely they cheat. The median score is about 82. And then you have this sort of not XY, the interquartile range and sorry, not interquartile range, the range, and then these are like the outliers. So there are still schools that cheat but score low here. And then as you go up integrity index, the median score declines because it's then we actually kind of know the real scores of these kids, because these are the honest schools where cheating is unlikely to happen, and then the median score is below 60. But there are also these elite schools up there where they are both honest, but then they score very high. So these are your, for example, elite private schools or really good public schools. So this graph also shows that cheating actually pays, because if your performance is measured by your score, then not cheating is something that principals and teachers should do.
How do we know that it's cheating? What's the index based on? Because a lot of cheating is very hidden.
Yeah, it's based on the response of the students.
But how do we know from the response?
So it's those two methods that I mentioned before. So they look at the pattern of answers. If they're identical in the classroom, if everybody answers the same way, so they have correct answers and wrong answers in almost the same way, then the chance that they're cheating is higher. And then the second one.
Hard to diagnose perfectly, obviously, right?
Yeah,
they could have just learned incorrectly in the same way.
That's why they did the second one, which is the aberrant response detection. because if they answer correctly in the harder items but did wrong in the easier items, then it's likely that they cheated. Yeah, so that's why they did the two methods. All right, so for the first time in 2015, the Indonesian government knows that about a third of their schools are likely to be cheating, and that's high by international standards. Moving on. All right, so this is a table of who actually cheats in 2015. The first thing that we noted when we look at integrity index between 2015 to 2018 is that it's relatively constant over time. So either a school cheats or a school doesn't cheat. So it can be considered as like a characteristics, which is time invariant. School characteristics, and so these are all 2015 variables. School characteristics have little explanatory power. So what we know, although these are statistically significant because the sample size is very high. For example, the student-teacher ratio is about similar between schools that are cheating and not cheating. Share of teachers with 4-year degree is very similar. Civil servant teachers are very similar and not specifically different. More are in rural schools, 75%, compared to 68% of the non-cheating schools. They are smaller, so it's 77 number of exam participants, about 77 compared to 105. And of course, computer lab. So where does it keep popping up?
More and then high floating controls. Just click on the chat first. I think it's
all right. So and computer labs show that only 40% of the cheating schools have computer lab, but 56% of the non-cheating schools have computer lab. So what we're showing here is that maybe school characteristics have little explanatory power. So if you look at school level characteristics, we can't really tell which school cheats. But what we can see in the next slide is that the spatial variation explains most of the variation in integrity index. So this is a map of Indonesia, as most of you know. This is at the district level, so every sort of location is the district level, and this shows the share of schools with integrity lower than 70, so share of cheating schools. By district, the red ones are where basically all schools in that district cheat. And as you can see, it goes up here, and here in the middle, up here, and here, which is the outer lying parts of Indonesia. In Java, which is the most developed part of the country, districts are relatively not cheating, so the share of schools that cheat are very low, and this is what explains most of the variation in integrity index.
So what's your intuition there, Daniel? That's quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, so we didn't really delve deeper into sort of the correlation between schools cheating and district characteristics, for example. But things that we can see here is maybe these are these are areas that are known to have relatively low performance in education anyway, and they have higher poverty rates, for example. And also, of course, Papua here. So yeah, but we didn't go deeper into that because we just tried to do this. I mean, it'll be interesting, for example, to look at the correlation between this score and whether district corruption indices or governance indices or
almost certainly co-determining factors, I guess.
Sorry?
They're almost certainly co-determining factors.
Yeah. So so these correlations I think would be positive, but we didn't look at those things.
Is there a mechanical change in the measurement that, like, say, conceptually, for a given level of cheating, as your performance gets better and education quality gets better, that index will still shrink as the schools and education system increases? You know what I mean?
I think so. I think so, but it's hard to say because they started calculating it in 2015, and by 2019, 80% of schools already switched to CBT, so we don't see their integrity index anymore. And by 2020, the national exam was abolished. So we're at the end of our data set in 2019.
Because those two measures, they need variation in what people are reporting, right? So you need quite a spread in what the kids are doing in the classroom rather than more sort of,
like a
matched group.
Yeah, and also learning levels and school quality, they go up very slowly over time, right? So it's hard to look at that correlation.
And similar to Italy means the north-south divide, I guess. That's what you're saying in the head.
Yeah.
So similar. So
So something else that I want to, so that's it for the national exam and the extent of cheating. I'm going to talk now about the computer-based testing or CBT, and this is what CBT looks like. So students get fit and face the computer, and then they just did the exam.
Just open the chat. Just click on the chat.
Now
it might stop coming back.
Thanks, Paul. You're really good at this. Oh, should I press more again?
That's all good.
Okay. So the CBT pilot began in 2015, like I mentioned, with 40 junior secondary schools. They implemented CBT as like sort of a Hail Mary attempt because since before they tried to increase the number of booklets. Usually it was 3 historically, and then they say, okay, let's try 20, and then still didn't work. And then at the end they say, we need to use a computer. So then they implemented CBT. So PBT is how they did it on paper, and this is computer-based. In PBT, like I mentioned, 20 exam booklets per classroom. In CBT, it's 1 per student. So what they did is that the system went into an item bank of 120,000 items, and they pull up about 20 or 30 questions, the multiple choice ones, at random. And then they also not only randomize the items that measure a specific skill, but they randomize the order in which that item is shown. So for 1 student, for example, you get the division question first. For the next student, you get the subtraction or the addition questions first. So it's like a 2-way randomization. And that's why you get only 1 per student, 1 version. The grading is done centrally in PBT, so they collected the answer keys and then they either graded at the provincial level or they posted, mail it to the ministry to be graded. And that's when teachers change the answers. In CBT, it's automatic. As soon as the student finishes the exam, then the score is calculated. The proctor is the same. So a teacher from a random school in the district will proctor a particular classroom and can't be a teacher from that school. I mentioned this already. Items are drawn from the same item bank within PBT and CBT. They test the same skills. Because there's only 1 booklet per student that's unique, the answer sheets are useless for CBT students. There's no point in copying because it's unique. But the consequence of having a unique exam per student is that you cannot calculate the integrity index anymore because the 2 methods don't really work. So for every school that switched to CBT, the ministry stopped calculating the integrity index. Okay, so staggered implementation after the pilots. In 2015, the next year staggered implementation, what the selection is like this. So schools apply to the Ministry of Education or districts apply. Districts can say, I want all my schools to switch to CBT, or schools can say, I want to switch to CBT. And they can do that once they have a sufficient number of computers in their school, or they set up an agreement with neighboring schools to do the test in the neighboring schools. In the case where schools apply, then the district government and then the provincial unit, I think, will then verify if yes, then the school is tagged as switched to CBT. And then, so this is done like 3 to 4 months before the actual exam, and then they will do the CBT during the exam. The ministry aimed for full CBT coverage, they say as soon as possible, but then in 2020, during the COVID pandemic, schools are closed and they abolished a national exam at the same time. So out of about the 50,000 junior secondary schools, 10,000 plus still did the PBT in 19 and CBT. So it started slow and then jumped in 2017 and then ramped up in 2018 and 2019. All right, so this table is about selection. This is all 2015 characteristics, the year before any school adopted CBT. The first column is the characteristics of schools that never implemented CBT. So this is the 10,000 one, 21% of all year secondary schools. Second column is the characteristic of schools that's the pilot schools, the 40. And then so that we think of that as a 2015 cohort. And then these are the other cohorts. So the 2019 is the characteristic of schools that switch to CBT for the first time in 2019. So the first thing to note from here is that the 2015 and the 2016 schools, the pilot and then the first batch or the first cohort are very different from the never treated schools. So just to give you an example, if you look at rural, for example, you see here, 90% of never treated schools are in rural areas. This is the difference. So only 20% of the pilot schools are in rural areas. And then in 2016, it's only about 18% of schools that switched in 2016 is in rural area. Internet as well, computer as well, and also student-teacher ratio. Never treated schools are smaller. These schools are bigger because there are more students per teacher. So that's one thing to note. So 15, 16 are very different, and we don't actually evaluate the impact of CBT in these two cohorts. So we started in 2017. Another thing to note is by 2019, the characteristics between the 2019 cohort and the never treated cohort is looking very, much more similar compared to the other cohorts. Yep. So that's the selection of CBT. This is also an interesting graph because switching to CBT changed the distribution of exam scores. So this is the distribution of exam scores of schools that eventually, became the treatment group. 14, 15 was were the years where they were still all doing PBT. And as you can see, it's very interesting because there are two humps in the distribution. One is here, which is just about the passing grade, you can see. And then there's another one which is at 70. So for some reason, there is two humps here. And that kind of, shows that these scores are being modified because it's very high for about the passing grade and then about 70. So maybe 70 is a threshold or something. And then as soon as these schools switch to CBT, then you can see this normal distribution of scores, and it's much lower.
Sorry, schools could opt out of switching.
They could, but in our data set, out of this 70% of schools that already switched, only about 200 opt out from CBT back to PBT afterwards. So we kind of dropped them from the analysis.
Why would that put easy in the first place?
We don't know.
So it's not random.
Yeah, it's not. It's in the data set. They self-select, right? So they say they want to join CBT, and then
could be an important part of the story.
Yes, but it's only about 200 schools out of the 40,000 that switch back. So not that many switch back. So what we did in this paper is just we leave them out from the analysis. I'll talk about it later.
Switching in is also not random.
That's right. There's selection in here. So this one shows that switching to CBT affected schools with low integrity more. So rather than pointing to a big screen, I'll show it here. So this is the score of the schools that in 2015 are shown to have low integrity. So they're cheating. And we bin this into 20 bins. The vertical axis is the PBT exam score in 2015. So they're still cheating, and CBT exam score in 2019. So there's no cheating here, we assume. The first thing you could see here is that in 2015, all these schools with low integrity have very similar average scores. So it's all 70. And then up a little bit to about 75. While schools that have higher integrity have a little bit higher variation, on the vertical axis. And then on the horizontal axis, after they all switch to CBT, they're all on above the 45-degree line, which means score are all lower. but the correction is much bigger for schools with low integrity. So for these schools here, they scored 70 in PBT, but then as soon as they switch to CBT, they scored 40. So it's like 30 points reduction in average score. For these schools here that are more honest, they scored 50 in paper-based, and they scored 40 when they switched to computer-based. So this is, part of the sort of the supporting evidence that CBT actually reduces the chance of cheating. All right. So another thing that we want to show is this correlation between exam scores and district and school characteristics. So under PBT, where they're still cheating, there's some pretty weird correlations. So for example, the share of district population that's literate, it's negatively correlated with PBT score. So more of your adults are educated, your PBT score is lower, which, we think doesn't make sense according to the literature. But when they switch to CBT, then the correlation becomes positive, which makes sense. More educated population means higher scores. Another one is this one here, share of population that's poor. It was positively correlated when schools were still doing paper-based. So the more poor households there are in a district, the better their score is on average. But as soon as they switch to CBT, then it's negative. So the correlation now is negative, which we think is more reasonable. All right, so those are all just the descriptive stats. So I'm going to go through the estimation methods now, and you have to go faster. Okay. So what we did is we did an event study for each treatment cohort, and we allow for 1 year of anticipation. So that's the double difference model that we use. Y is the exam score of school S in district T, district D at time T. The alphas T and S are the year and school fixed effects. And then the DESDT is sort of the lags and the leads. So we have data from K to L, which is 2010 to 2019. And we allow for 1 year of anticipation, which means the beta E's here is tied to the year before treatment, so T-2 rather than T-1. And then what we did is, because 2015, 2016 cohorts are very different, we limit the analysis to 2017, 18, and 19 cohorts, which contains 98% of treated schools. We use the Callaway-Santana method to combine the cohorts, because this method addresses this two-way fixed effects issue when you combine multiple cohorts that have staggered entry into treatment. Then you have, these like cardinal sin or control schools or something, and we avoided that with the Callaway-Santana method. We also expected heterogeneous treatment effects between cohorts, so those that enter first would have a different effect of CBT compared to those that enter later. Callaway and Santana allow conditional parallel trends, but I'm going to show you the unconditional ones because they're already parallel. We use the never treated group as the controls, and then we use a universal base year of 2015. So the baseline is on 2015 rather than a moving base year. This one doesn't really change the results if we use the moving base year or a universal base year.
Sorry, did you use the not yet treated and never treated?
No, we just use the never treated, because in the article they say it's much cleaner to use the never treated rather than use the not yet treated, and so we did that. We, in different specifications, we tried the not yet treated as well. The results are not that different; they're relatively the same, but that confused a referee, so we thought we just use never treated.
You need a better class of referee. Typically, people are going to be the opposite. In terms of parallel trends, the not yet treated are more believable in parallel trends point of view.
Yeah.
Never treated or typical choices to exclude.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why Callaway and Santana recommended never treated is because it's just cleaner in the sense that your control group is the same, right, within the cohorts. Because otherwise, then in the 2017 cohort, you have 18 and 19 as the control plus the never treated. So yeah.
You can present both of them, right, Judy? I suppose.
Yes, we did both. The results are similar. Yeah. Maybe if I can nominate you as a referee in the next submission, then yeah. Okay, so just a little bit more of the specification. We use the balanced sample of schools with exam data for which we have every school. So this is your question, Paul. We excluded the 188 schools that switched to CBT and then back to PBT before 2019 because we're not really sure why they did it. And because it's only 188, it's hard to sort of see, in the data why are they different or not. So our final sample is about 39,000 out of the 56,000 schools that participated in the 2019 exam. Identification assumption, average student ability within school is stable over time. So this will be violated, for example, if schools change. If the parents, as soon as they know that the school is going to switch to CBT, they take out their child and move her to a PBT school, then that would violate this assumption. But we didn't think this happened because announcement of switching to CBT takes place 3-4 months before the actual exam. And kids enter school at grade 7, they have to do the test in grade 9. So it's like a 2-year forward looking, plus the ramp up between 16, 17, 18, 19 was very quick. So it's hard to see that kind of strategic behavior by the parents. Also, the number of test takers, if that's different, then that could show, parents just don't let their kids do the exam maybe this year, but let them do it next year to prepare or something. But what we see is the number of exam participants are the same. So the switching to CBT doesn't change the number of exam participants. The second one is the common trends. Kalau yang Santa test for parallel trends to the pseudo ATT for each pre-treatment period. So they take 2 years treatment and control, and then they pretend that this one is treated year, and then they look at the effects for each of the pre-treatment periods. But I'm not going to show you this one. I'm just going to show you the classic event study type, but we think the parallel trends are okay. And then we present the heterogeneity by subject integrity in 2015 and computer access in 2015 as a way to see whether it's actually computers switching to computers or it's actually a lower chance of cheating that makes a difference. All right, so results. So this is the results per cohort, unconditional. So the top one is the double difference estimates for the 2017 cohort, 2018 and 2019. You can see trends are, parallel pre-treatment. It's all tied to this T-2 base period. And as soon as a school switches to CBT, then they have a 5-point correction in their test scores, and that's about average exam score. And that's about 0.4 standard deviations. So you see it here for the 2017 cohort. And then it sort of bounced back and the impact of CBT became insignificant. I'll talk about it later, but this is because of the spillover to the PBT schools, to the schools that have not yet done the CBT. Same for the 2018 cohort. So we see this anticipation here. We didn't see it here because they didn't know they were going to switch to CBT. This one, they already do, the principals already anticipated they will probably switch the following year. So the year before, they already maybe tried to lower the cheating a little bit. So we see this 1 period anticipation, which we took into account. But we still see a correction of about similar points. So between -5 to -6. And in this one, it doesn't recover in 2019, 2 years after. For the 2019 cohort, we see the same anticipation and the same correction to exam scores. So when we combine all of this into the sort of this event study, then parallel trends are okay. And then we only have this one, which is the common year of adoption for the 3 cohorts. And we see the -5 points in the exam results. Yeah. All right, so this is the effect of CBT by the subjects. In Indonesian, the score is lower by about 2 points. In English, by about 5. Science is a bit bigger, like 5 or 6, but then for math, it's bigger by almost 10, which shows that, as soon as you can't cheat, then the harder subjects saw the bigger corrections, which to us makes sense, and again shows that it's probably not because switching to computers is because you can't really cheat. And then in this one, we look at impact heterogeneity by integrity and by computers at the same time. So the top left one is the effect on schools that do not cheat and have computers. The one on the right, schools that do not cheat but do not have computers. So what we expect here is if the correction is due to computers, then we would see this one to be much larger because they're not used to having computers. Bottom left, cheating schools with computers. Bottom right, cheating schools without computers. And you can see the biggest corrections take place in schools that were cheating in 2015. So this one is -10 with computers. Those cheating schools without computers, slightly bigger correction, so -12. But for schools that had been honest in 2015 with or without computers made little difference. This one, this is a different slide. So this is the one that I will show you. And then we were worried about this parallel, non-parallel trends here, and it was driven actually by the 2017 cohort. So when we removed the 2017 cohort, just 2018 and 19, then it became parallel. All right.
How many observations in the 2017? You get just to lead to observations to get the results from that.
That's right. Wait, I'll have a look. 9,000 schools switched to CBT in 2017, 16,000 in 2018, and 13,000 in 2019. So yeah, so first we did the by cohort, right? The impact estimation, and then we combined. So yeah, so that's what we did for this one, just to show that it's driven by the 2017 cohort. That's basically it. So now we look at, we want to look at spillovers more. So we estimate this model for the never treated schools. And the main difference is this one here, which is the average, this is the proportion of schools that switch to CBT. This is only estimated for schools that never treated up to 2019. And we see their scores, sort of fraction of CBT in the district, had a negative correlation with exam scores only in never treated schools that were cheating in 2015. So this one. So never treated schools still doing paper-based, but were cheating in 2015. In this year, where more schools in that district switched to CBT, they saw a 10-point correction to their exam scores. And they saw a 10-point higher integrity index in their exam. There is no effect on schools that still did PBT but did not cheat in 2015, this one here. So we think this is, again, due to them not being able to cheat anymore, this correction. So now we want to correct for the spillovers. So what we did two things. We augmented that model in equation 1 with this one here that introduces the integrity score of the never treated school. So this dummy here means that it's only for the never treated schools, and that's their integrity score. So that's in one specification. In the other specification, we use this one, the share of schools that switch to CBT in that district. So this is the finding when we corrected for spillovers. So the first thing to see here in the 2017 cohort, the uncorrected and the corrected ones are pretty similar, like 1 point difference. And after it's corrected, it's bigger because the control schools couldn't cheat anymore, right? So that's the spillover is going in the area where it diminishes the effect size. So effect sizes became bigger by about 1 point. In the 2018 cohort, it's also a bigger by about 1 point. 2019 cohort, it's much bigger here. So the effect of spillover correction increases with the cohorts. Maybe because the 2019 cohort schools are more similar to the control schools, and that's why the correction happens more. And the decline in test scores in the first year switching remains large. So even though these schools in 2018 and 2019 sort of knew that they might have to switch to CBT, they didn't really do sort of much to teach the students properly, or with trying to, not have too big of a correction. And then when we look at the cohorts here, so if you remember, this is the main one that I showed you for the 27 cohort, -5 points, and then smaller, and then non-significant. When we corrected it, then it didn't really change. So -5.7, 4.4, and then 6. So that going up again that we saw in the main results, that's due to the spillovers. This one is the same. It was -9 and then -11. So there's no sort of bounce back. All right, final slide. So what we found was that CBT was able to drive out cheating. It significantly reduced average exam scores, with evidence pointing to significantly lower chance to cheat as the main reason. In the main one, where we combine all the cohort, it's -5.4 points or 0.4% deviations when schools switch to CBT. CBT in correcting for cheating changed the distribution of learning outcomes. So I showed you in the beginning in the descriptive stats that used to have these two humps, and then it became normally distributed. And that sort of points to existence of a cheating culture, because that hump is around the area where scores that students need to, to graduate. And then that has disappeared after schools switched to CBT. Final one, schools that still took the exam on paper cheat less as more schools around them switch to computers, which kind of shows that cheating is more difficult to do. Maybe because the demand and the supply, demand is lower, supply is lower, so you can't really cheat. And if you remember the proctor story, if a teacher comes from a CBT school and she proctors the PBT schools, she wouldn't want them to cheat, right? Because she knows that her students can't cheat anymore. So that could be another one. The problem is we don't have to do it to test these things. We saw no evidence of higher grades in the years post-CBT. And then, unfortunately, national exams stopped in 2020, so we can't collect more data. So that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Daniel. And let's go to questions now. And if you're in the online group, please click raise hand if you'd like to ask a question, or put your question into the chat. That's okay too. Please get my hand if you get my eye if you'd like to ask a question. Let's start with Blaine and then to the front row here.
Thanks a lot. That's very interesting. One figure that might be nice to see is how the average exam scores across the country change over time. And just a simple figure like that. So my understanding is that once the test score was delinked from graduation, the test scores kind of fell off the end of the table. Was that 2011?
2011, yeah. I only have 2014 and 15 here. The average is still about 70 this is a school that eventually switched. So the better treated schools would have, I assume, maybe higher average.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it might be interesting to see the time before that, say 2010 onwards, so you see what happened to the scores of 2011. That might be something you might argue that's potentially founder. Just a couple points on the paper early this morning. The results seem different in the paper. The only pre-trans in the paper, the pre-trans was great. Now they look a lot better. But I'd be surprised if a reviewer didn't ask you to conduct the joint test. Those pre-trans. Right?
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, what you find, especially in California, I've noticed from experience is that even though individual pre-trends look pretty good, the joint test fails.
Significant, yeah.
Yeah, that's no good, right? That's no good. So, I mean, you might, if nobody's asked you to do it, somebody you already submitted, and so for your own interest, you might conduct that joint.
Sorry, Blaine, the referee actually asked for that. So the results that we show in the paper are the conditional ones.
With covariance?
With covariance and also with the untreated, I think. That's what we should.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to suggest. If the parallel trends assumption goes to 5, and you either have to add the specific time trends or covariance.
Yeah, I think so. So this joint one. So I was reading, well, not me. Emily was reading the subsequent blog post by Grant Calloway, and he was proposing a different test rather than the joint test. Not sure why he was doing that. Where he said you can do it for every pre-group individually, and then just see if that has any effect.
In these days, the most the recent papers they do both. They look at the individual tests for the pre-test, each individual
The overall one.
and then the joint test.
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah.
It might not turn out the way you want it, of course.
We try.
The only other thing is that, these days on the parallel trends test, what a lot of people are doing is using this procedure developed by Romo, Johnson, and Roth.
Yeah.
It's the honest DID package, either in the article and state, which one you're using. And so that provides you with a way to test the sensitivity results to violations in parallel trends. I can see what John is doing that. Now it's pretty recent paper last year. It's already worked on.
Yes.
And one other thing I thought of, which is sort of unrelated, but if you want to show the probability of teaching, what you might do is steal a technique from regression discontinuity and use the passing score as the cutoff to see whether there's obvious manipulation in the test. That would be kind of a cool thing. You can stick it in the appendix or something like that. Right? You're not using that for your estimation, but you can still use the manipulation test for RTD to show that it's like test likely manipulation test. All right, that's it for you. Thanks. Great paper, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Blake. Thanks very much. I knew presenting here was good because you're the expert of this. Yeah.
Not really, but I'll take it.
That's good to you.
Hi there. Just wondering where you see this topic going before, because quick disclaimer, this is my personal view and not the view of my previous employer, but I feel that there's two big shocks coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is one, the changing of the curriculum, abolishing the national exams and changing the curriculum, keep curriculum provision to curriculum data. And two, during the COVID-19 pandemic and studying at home, there's higher possibility of cheating and the popularity of learning tools among students, which were highest, do actually help with that cheating process. So just wondering where we can move forward with this topic.
Measuring this learning loss and also trying to find a way to recover learning. So we have, like experiments on the ground in Indonesia using technology as well, one of them, and we're also helping the government with evaluating their programs. But I think the headline finding from here is that it's possible to reduce cheating in a context where it's systematic and everybody actually has an incentive to continue the cheating. Except these people in the ministry that manage to then, write a regulation that encourages switching to CBT. And it seems to work. So we think it's good because, as you know, in Indonesia, not many education policies worked, but this one appeared to work. So it's good. Sorry.
Yeah. So can you see any variation of cheating pattern based on question types? Like you say that in PPT you have this open question and also the multiple choice. What about in CPT? Is it also is everything multiple choice or does it also have open question? That's my first question. And the second, the -1 has a significant impact on some outcomes. Is there any so is there any like anticipation, maybe like the announcement to CBT next year so that we prepare this year? I mean, maybe like pattern from the teacher might like kind of like train their students to like be prepared next year, something like that. So
Yeah, I think so. So just on the anticipation, we know that there's anticipation because teachers can, or principals can guess maybe that they have to do it. And that's why we built this anticipation into the method. And that's allowed by this Callaway Santana one, which is why the base here is that one, which is T-2, this one, rather than T-1. Because if we had used that as a base, base meaning it's 0, then the effect would be smaller here compared to there. So we already take that into account, this anticipation. And it shows that it's true that we need to take anticipation into account. Yeah, on the cheating pattern, it's hard you can't do it anymore using the integrity methods, right? Because the booklet is now unique for each student. The ministry theoretically have item level information, and then if they want, then they can sort of match it around, link it with same item that's done on CBT and same item that's done on PBT and see the performance or the score. But they didn't give us access to that. They only gave us access to these things that we used. So we can do that analysis.
What type of question, like multiple choice or
CBT and PBT has both multiple and then the short answers skills.
Maybe two people like more likely, because I don't know, like when I was in high school, I think it was easier to cheat using the multiple choice because you can do like the signaling thing, like this.
Yeah. No, don't answer that. That's a trick question. So this one here, so they only have maybe 2 questions. That's like you have to fill out, and then the rest is like multiple choice. So I mean, I'm not surprised. A lot of people I talk to sort of know that cheating happens. The ministry knows, district governments know, everybody knows. Yeah. So even teachers do it, so you don't even have to code or something to do codes with your friends.
Yeah.
They give you the answer keys like this. And you just match the booklet number and then fill in the answers.
Yeah, I was thinking of like, the future, like the design of like how many questions would be multiple choice, how many questions would be like short answers or open question, like combination, or like would be like
I mean, the ministry experimented with that, but they didn't like the small thing that you have to write. Because a lot of students, because they know they will graduate anyway, they don't take the exam. So some they say they don't take the exam seriously, so they answer randomly. So they have to stick to multiple choice, I think.
Daniel, there is one question in the chat. We'll just give you a moment to read this question from Yelly.
Thanks research.
Right.
I don't know. So refer to the next research, which will put the national exam score as their output should consider. Oh, I see. So what we're finding is that computer-based testing should be the way to go, not only because that it can almost minimize or eradicate cheating, but also because it's cheaper. Once the schools have computers, we calculated the cost of doing CBT is about $2 million compared to $9 million for PBT. That's just the cost, and also the logistics and the possibility of leakage and all these things. I mean, national exams in Indonesia used to be something big. You used to have like police officers guarding the exam booklets and all that to reduce cheating. Not anymore, because the ministry just blasted all the exam questions to each computer automatically now, so it's much cheaper. So I hope that answers your question yearly.
And let's go to one more in the room and then back to online. Johannes.
Yes, you should like the locations with the spatial variation. I just wondered, can you not exploit this point? I think there's a lot of correlation of different parameters here. Even so, the computer resources at school integrity index, it's all linked to locations.
Yeah.
I think in terms of how I have that case, but in terms of policy implications, it might be a good way to explore further this rural-urban divide. I mean, it's a strong pattern.
Yeah. I mean, we discussed it with my co-authors that we can, for example, write an analysis that does a correlation analysis of all this integrity index with various characteristics, even teacher characteristics, school, district, budget, spending, all these things. But for this one, we kind of want to focus on just evaluating the impact of the CBT and then stop there. But maybe for a next paper, we can do these correlations.
Cheating is a function of all those reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have a treatment.
Yeah.
But if you don't change the function, it's just not.
Yes.
Just correct cheating afterwards. Not the source of cheating.
No, that's right. So what we were expecting before was to see a bounce back in the scores because it remains high stakes. Now they can cheat. So the teachers may, decide to actually teach. And we expected to see this bounce back, but no. So that kind of shows also, the kind of accountability structure and incentives facing teachers because actually they didn't have to teach better. They can just remain at that level. Yeah. I was going to show you something, but yeah, again, it's good ideas.
And Dika online.
Thank you, Daniel, for the presentation. Just a quick question to understand the policy context. Did the ministry also transition into CBT for senior high school during that time, or they want to use what were done in the junior high school before adopting that at the high level?
Yeah, they also did it for secondary senior high school. They started about the same time, so 2015 pilot, 16 ramp up, but they ramped up very quickly in senior high schools because there were much fewer senior high schools and they're more equipped in terms of computers and internet. So my sense is by 2018, it's already 100% for senior high schools on CBT. But yeah, we didn't look at that one. We look at the junior secondary school.
Daniel, I had a question as well. You had covariance there. How do we know that the effect, it seems all very convincing, but how do we know that it's just not that the computer test is a bit harder and that we're just not familiar with using a computer?
Yeah.
So that cuts our test scores. What's the most convincing part of that? Because of course, the cheating is correlated with socioeconomic things. You've controlled for some of the observable parts of that, probably stripping away quite a bit of the problem. But over to you, how do we know for sure that it's cheating rather than anything else to do with the computer?
Yeah, so we also tested this using this result. So in this one, for example, in the bottom one, I think it's better to compare it like this. So top left are the test scores of schools that were not cheating in 2015. So 2015 integrity is higher than 70, and they have computers. So the students are used to working on the computer. And this one is the schools that were cheating. So 2015 integrity is lower than 70 and have computers. As you can see, the effect is very small here. And the effect here is very big. Now, if we go the other way, so this is the honest schools that have no computers, the correction is also small. So if it were due to computers, we would expect this group here to have a bigger correction because they're not used to studying on the computer or doing exams on the computer. But no, so the results are similar with and without computers for honest schools, and the results are different even with computers for schools that were dishonest compared to the honest schools. So that's sort of, one, I think this would be the strongest evidence that it's due to the less chance of cheating other than due to the technology switch. Yeah, and then all the other things like the spillovers, where the schools that still did the paper-based test also had a correction in their scores only if they were dishonest before. So this one here. So if you look at the never treated schools and divide the sample into honest schools and dishonest schools, then there is no correction for this one. This is just the control group. So there's no spillover of the exam scores from switching to CBT for these PBT schools. But the big correction is here. So it only affects schools that were cheating before.
Just one other practical question about the computers.
Yeah.
Can students chat with one another on the computer? And is there any feedback on how students enjoy doing computer-based exams?
So the ministry did surveys on, do you know how to use computer and things like this, and that they can put those short questions on the exam before or after they finish the exam. We didn't analyze that. They can't chat. So what they did usually is that they sort of what's called sterilize the computer labs like a week before, so nobody can access the computer labs a week before. And then just in the morning, as soon as all the exams are downloaded into the computers, then they let the students in, and they're still proctors. Yeah, I mean, the ministry had all these other things that we can analyze, like how quickly a student takes to answer a particular question, which can also indicate, whether you're cheating or not serious, or are you thinking about it. But we didn't have access to those things.
And some very remote regions also have been using the computers.
Yes, so they can borrow other schools' computers. In some cases, the junior secondary students went to the senior high schools with computers to do the exam there. So when they have to borrow other computer in other schools, then the exam will have to be on different dates, right? So there's this small chance in the window of these 24 hours that everybody that did the exam first sort of tried to answer all the questions and then distribute that around. But because it was drawn from a sample of 120,000 items, they look very different. So I think they couldn't cheat.
At a school level, it looks different, but every student has the same, or every student
has a different one.
Questions.
Yeah, different one.
Yeah,
just to add, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there were like mock exams as well to help the student familiarize themselves with the system. So,
Yeah.
We have two questions here. So first of all, it's Nadine and then Adina. Please speak very loudly.
I actually want to know about the technology qualification as well, but I already know the answer. But I just wondering, just asking out of curiosity, will you ever seen any pattern on private school and public school, and understand the difference between the two types of school? Yeah, just curious, because sometimes private school have better facilities, so maybe they can adapt better than public school. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So we didn't do the impact heterogeneity by public-private. Yeah, but let me see. So what we see here is that, so if you look at schools that were cheating and not cheating, 41% of the cheating schools were public, 43 were public in the non-cheating one. So the share of private schools are about the same. So we didn't see much difference in cheating pattern between public and private. They cheated, same, basically. And in terms of infrastructure, actually public schools are more equipped than private schools on average in Indonesia. Only the elite schools in Jakarta or other big cities are much, much better. But the average private school in, say, a small city would have, fewer resources than public schools.
This doesn't include Islamic schools.
No, we didn't analyze the Islamic schools.
Thanks for the presentation. This is just more for clarification. This is all very new to me, and I wasn't sure what you mean by the spillover effects on the control group with how can one school that does not have computer benefit from the benefit or have like effects, unintended effects when they're still doing paper? I wasn't sure how you.
Yeah.
Right, correct. That's appropriate.
Yeah, no, that's right. So the spillover goes through what we think. What we're thinking is the main channel would be they cannot cheat anymore. So when they're still doing paper-based, they still like to cheat because a lot of schools are already doing computer-based. They don't cheat anymore. So this market for answer keys, for example, supply and demand of answer keys became much thinner. So they maybe couldn't get the answer keys quickly enough or couldn't get for the whole 20 packets or all that. And that's why they sort of suffer. So that's a spillover channel from CBT to the PBT schools. And that's what we showed in that table before.
Is that okay?
So Brian in the chat.
Brian has some interesting.
Yeah, I think Brian also did research in CBT, in cheating, I think. I think Emily talked to Brian a while ago. Thanks, Brian.
Any additional question? Yeah, but just at the very beginning of your presentation, you said that some of your results were quite sensitive to various changes in specification. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
It didn't really seem for sensitivity.
No, so what we did is we tried to do the conditional one because of this selection that we see into CBT. So we tried to condition on those. The paper, the Callaway-Santana paper was a bit weird because they say you have to control for things that will change the trend, right, rather than the level. So we tried to think about what can change the trend of exam score. So the first thing we did is we just put everything here, all the selection variables here. And then the results became weird because unconditional. So we just put all these things here into the conditional. So unconditionally, there was parallel trends, as you can see in the results. But when we put the conditional, then the parallel trends sort of disappeared, especially in the 2017 cohort, because there's little common support. There's more common support in the 2019 cohort, and there it's better. But still, because of so much non-overlap or very little common support in the 2017 cohort, when we put that in, then the overall effects sort of, the parallel trends disappear.
Typically, people only you include covariates for one or two reasons. One is to force the pre-trends to zero if they are not otherwise, or to increase the precision of your estimates, so to reduce the standard errors. If you've already got some decent results and the parallel trends look okay, then there's no reason to include covariates, right? And I have noticed that when you include covariates, they have a variety of estimators when they have covariates, right?
Yeah.
Robust, non-robust, inverse probability weighted,
Yeah.
etc. I have noticed that the results vary quite a bit.
Yes.
By estimating.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you don't have to use covariates, that's a lot better, actually.
Yeah. No, that's right. We weren't going to use that after we look at the unconditional one. But on the other hand, this big selection that we see is all significant. Also, I think if a referee sees that, then they will say, well, maybe you should do a conditional.
But the assumption is not that, there's no need for balance in the traditional sense at the pretreatment period, right? But you don't need to have means of covariates be equal across treatment.
Yeah.
It's just not what the assumption is, right? The
Yeah.
assumption is they don't change.
That's right.
Over time, right? So.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks. And also, we actually failed the joint test, the unconditional one.
With the covariates?
Without the covariates.
Without the covariates?
And the result is that it's all zero, which is weird.
Now, I've noticed that about Callaway-Santana, you've got all the pre-trends are individually insignificant, but when you conduct the joint test, you get a bad result. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe the test is wrong.
Daniel, there's one hand raised. Good participants.
Yes, Rosdiana, go ahead.
Thank you, Pak Daniel. Salam kenal, Pak Daniel. Just a short question. Sorry, maybe I missed your information in the beginning of your presentation. I just wanted to know, how do you know, or how does our government find that a school, particular school, cheated during the exam? Thank you, Pak Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Rosdiana. So they did this integrity index calculation for each school, using all these methods that I'm showing on the slide. And that's how they then create an index between 0 and 100. And they say schools that score below 70 is likely to have cheated. So that's what they did.
So the government built the index?
Yes.
And the government asked the school like to fill or to answer some question to follow the index?
No, so they did it through the items answer, the way the students answer the exam, basically. And then they look at this detection of answer copying and I don't know how to pronounce it actually, aberrant response. And then they did this qualitative verification. It's all based on how the students in that school answer that particular exam that year. Not through a separate survey or a questionnaire.
All right. Thank you, Pak Daniel.
Yeah.
Maybe just as a final way, because no other hand up, there will be measurement error in that variable, and it might be correlated with something. So I wonder if you could just comment on whether you think that would be a problem.
The integrity index? Yeah, I mean, we received this score as is from the ministry, from Rahmawati, and we just used it. We didn't use integrity index in the impact evaluation because that's all unconditional. It's only on switching and the exam scores. So I think the extent to which measurement error would be a problem is it gives us any strange results. Yeah, in our analysis of the rest of these things in the like here, right? And then we try to see whether this score actually is valid, reliable, and things. So we did several analysis. One is this one, looking at exam scores by integrity, which makes sense, and then all the other things like this one, and they also kind of make sense. But yeah, I mean, there's no way to guarantee against measurement error. Sorry, not very convincing.
All right, I think we have come to the end. That was a very impressive seminar and program. We're just starting our series for the year. Can we please thank Daniel? Daniel, come and visit us more often.
Every year at least, then.
Yeah.
Would you plan to steal your away from me?
Well, my employer might be suspicious if I come here all the time. I hope we